and welcome. This is Bicycle Touring Talk, episode 116. I am George Schlackheg.
Whoa.
And I'm here to tell you all about cycling across Canada, coast to coast. The way it works is one episode at a time, from west to east. If you're new here, check out the entire playlist. This story begins at the Waikokoma Provincial Park on Cape Breton Island, Nova Scotia, where I had spent an afternoon and had camped overnight. I was up early on Monday, August 21st, 2017. It had rained overnight and there was no point in leaving the park in a hurry. Checkout was at 1 o'clock and the sun was drying my tent ever so slowly. I made instant coffee and sandwiches for breakfast and then took a long warm shower and finally discovered that the park actually had Wi-Fi, which allowed me to connect to the internet for a while. It was almost 12 by the time I left my campsite. The ride continued on the Trans-Canada up to exit 6, which was route 223. At Little Narrows, a ferry was taking vehicles and me across the channel. The crossing took only a few minutes and was free of charge. I was getting more and more hungry, but I was also pretty much out of the food that I could eat without preparation. Just when I was starting to wonder how far I would have to ride, a sign popped up that announced a restaurant was not too far ahead. What surprised me was when the next sign was right by an old church. As it turned out, the restaurant was inside the church. A few people gathered outside told me that the food was great. I had a huge burger with fries and ice cream for dessert. After lunch, I met a young family from Germany who were on their first vacation in Canada. It happened to be a day of a solar eclipse, which was nearly impossible to notice without looking directly at the sun through really dark glasses. My new friends from Germany had a couple of those and let me have a peek. It was really pretty neat. As I was watching that phenomenon, I was thinking of Barbara, who I knew would be doing the same thing back home in Edmonton. The ride continued through beautiful country and always along the St. Andrews Channel. At one point, there was a neat bridge after a fast descent. I turned on my camera to film the fast crossing, but when I noticed that there was a public beach just before the bridge, I changed my mind and stopped for a swim. The water was crystal clear and salty, like the ocean. The temperature was on the cool side, at least when first going in, but it became really pleasant after only a few minutes. I still had a can of beans to eat with noodles and sardines for supper, so I was okay there, wherever I could cook it. Along the ride, I found another little store and bought some chips and more ice cream to tie me over. It was one of those days when I just couldn't get enough calories into my body. There were a few small villages along my way. As the sun came close to setting, I started to look for a campsite, and I eventually found an empty lot with an overgrown driveway and some well-protected spots. this was probably as good as it was gonna get, so I pushed my bike in there and found a tree to lean my bike. Next, I set up the tent and then I cooked supper exactly as I had imagined. There was a fallen tree I was able to sit on while I ate. When I was done, it was almost too dark to clean the pot. But somehow I got it done. I fell asleep quickly after settling down in my tent. The next day, I got up and out of my camping spot as soon as it was light without eating anything for breakfast at all. I figured that I would only go as far as the first picnic table or restaurant, whichever came first. It wasn't very far to a little roadside park with several picnic tables and a shelter. In hindsight, I wished I would have known about this place before, because it would have made a perfect spot for camping, and there wasn't any sign forbidding it. I pretty much ate everything I had left and washed it down with hot coffee. The weather was really nice. Even early in the morning, I already had to apply some sunscreen. Right after I left that little park, which was east of Boysville, there was a huge long hill to climb. Oh boy, that was a long climb. It was a little bit unexpected at this point, but yeah, that's when you're going about 6 or 7 kilometers an hour, and you could probably pass me if you're running. Aside from that, it was a pleasant ride with a mild tailwind. At one point, a familiar-looking car passed me. It was a German family I had met the day before, and they all waved to me from the car. It wasn't too long until I reached the intersection of Highway 125, which is the main link between Sydney and North Sydney. Was I going to continue straight through to the ferry terminal? I had well over 24 hours before check-in. My old friend Fred had mentioned that I was welcome to stay at his parents' house for a night, and I had the address near Port Caledonia. Where was this anyways? All I knew was that I had to go through the town of Sydney, so I went south on that boring expressway. It wasn't a very long ride. After only a couple of exits, I got off. I made a stop for coffee and some reorientation via the internet at McDonald's. Then another at Walmart to stock up on food. According to Google Maps, I still had 35 kilometers to go to my friend's house. I went right through town, which was a bit sketchy due to poorly marked roads and a lack of proper space for cyclists. You get the picture. Eventually, I ended up on a separated bike trail along Highway 4. It went all the way to the outskirts of Glace Bay, where I had to turn. I had no trouble at all finding the house where Fred's parents lived. They were nice people. I had never even met them in person before, but they treated me as if I was part of the family. Besides Fred's parents, their daughter was also visiting from Vancouver. The family was getting ready for a pig roast for that weekend to celebrate Fred Sr.'s birthday. I had a relaxing afternoon, including a shower, spaghetti and homemade biscuits for supper, followed by a walk on the beach with my friend's sister. Before bed, I got to enjoy a beer with Fred Sr. while watching some TV. Well, folks, east of Sydney, Nova Scotia is about as far as you can go on the mainland. But I wasn't done yet. Unfortunately, you can't cycle across the Gulf of St. Lawrence. If I wanted to go further, the only way would be a ferry. There are 2 options for that. The first one goes to Port aux Basques, and it takes about 7 hours. The problem with that one was time, because it would have taken another 2 weeks or so to get to the East Coast and the city of St. John's on a highway that no one recommended for cycling. The other was a 16-hour ferry ride to the port of Argentia, from where I could get to St. John's in a day or two on a less dangerous highway. I had already pre-booked my ride on the Argentia ferry that goes only 3 times a week. In the next episode, I'll tell you all about that voyage.